Everything that happens here is going to affect every other place in the world.
When stakes are so high, we will keep fighting.
You were born for this moment.
I'm ready to win.
We aim every night to be factual and fair. That's our goal.
Tonight, is President Biden's bipartisan offer enough to avert a government shutdown? And could wearing a high-tech bra help women fight heart disease? Plus, you've heard of surge pricing for ride services, but how about for fast food?
We've continually asked for and demanded for a permanent and lasting ceasefire, and we have to see that echo in the highest office of the world.
Our goal is to organize enough people behind the vote uncommitted box to send a message to Biden and his administration.
We are making good progress.
We believe that we can get to agreement on these issues and prevent a government shutdown, and that's our first responsibility.
Hi, I'm Scott McFarland in Washington. Welcome to America Decides. Michigan voters are heading to the polls in Democratic and Republican primaries today with the potential of major implications for November. President Biden faces a test of his support in this swing state. Some Democrats there are urging voters to choose uncommitted to send a message about his response to the Israel-Hamas war. Meanwhile, former President Trump is expected to beat former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley in the state tonight, but he faces a block of voters who may favor still his lone rival left in the race. Caitlin Huey-Burns and Ed O'Keefe join us now. Caitlin is CBS News' political correspondent. Ed is CBS News' senior White House and political correspondent. Ed, let's start out with you. You are near the polls themselves, and you can shoot baskets while you're there, which is great. Why don't you start us off with what you're hearing from the voters with whom you're speaking tonight?
Scott, there is an interest in this option that primary voters on both sides have had for several years, and that is the ability to vote uncommitted or, in essence, register opposition to those that are on your primary ballot. There's been a big push here among progressives, among Arab and Muslim American leaders to use that option as a way to send a message to the president that there's displeasure, criticism, concern for his stance on the ongoing conflict in the Middle East. We heard from some voters and volunteers about why it is they're going to vote that way.
And at this point of time, with what's happening internationally, with our current foreign policy and the way Biden has been handling this situation, the uncommitted option on the Democratic ballot seems to send a very strong message and amplify our voice.
Our goal is to organize enough people behind the vote uncommitted box to send a message to Biden and his administration.
And we should point out, it's not just Arab and Muslim Americans who live in this state. The biggest concentration of them in the country is here in Dearborn. Jewish voters, black voters, Latino voters we've heard from across the state say they, too, want to use this as a way to register their concern. And there's nuance to this. Just because someone might vote uncommitted today and not for the president in the Democratic primary doesn't necessarily mean they're not going to vote for him in November. There are those who say there's no way they're going to do it because they're opposed to the fact that so many civilians have died in Gaza, many of them with relatives in this city or across this state. But there are others who see this as a way to send him an early message. We talked about it with the Democratic mayor of this city, the first Arab American mayor of this city, earlier today, and he explained some of the nuance. Take a listen.
We've continually asked for and demanded for a permanent and lasting ceasefire, and we have to see that echo in the highest office of the world in the president's administration. And so people are trying to come out today on election day and to cast a ballot for uncommitted, to advocate for a course correction, or else we risk losing all of American democracy with the re-election of Donald Trump.
There are those who say, I'm voting uncommitted today. I'm totally opposed to voting for the president in November. There are those who say today's a chance to sort of send him a message and we'll see about November. Where do you come down on that?
I think for me, it's, every resident is going to be different on this issue. It's hard to walk up to somebody who has lost dozens of loved ones in Gaza and ask them how they're going to come vote come November when they're suffering and feeling much grief. I think personally for me, short of seeing a course correction, all that does is open up at least the doors for more conversation. We want to see a ceasefire. We want to see a restriction of military aid. We want to see the re-entrance of humanitarian aid, which is down 50% month over month now. And we want to see a just solution for the Palestinian people, because a reversion back to the status quo pre-October 7th is also unacceptable.
So for you, voting uncommitted today doesn't necessarily mean voting against the president in November?
I think for me, voting uncommitted today is sending a message of we're trying to hold our elected official accountable. And that's what this system provides us. It's organizing a voting bloc, organizing this community, and trying to usher our country forward on a better path.
Scott, traditionally, the uncommitted vote gets about 20,000 votes cycle to cycle. The hope is to get at least 10,000 to send a signal to the president and remind him that Hillary Clinton lost this state by about 10,000. But there are some here in this state who believe it's going to get more than that and well into double digits. We'll see.
Let's bring in Caitlin. This just feels so different than February in an election year is supposed to feel. We know the winners tonight, and it's so early in the calendar. So that being said, what do you think's interesting or worth watching for in that context?
Yeah, you've heard some Republicans describe this as the primary in name only, because Donald Trump is the favored candidate in most of these races, including in Michigan tonight. Nikki Haley making the point today that she's only spent about 2 days in Michigan. Donald Trump has spent, in her words, 8 years campaigning there. What's interesting, though, to watch, though, is what the Haley campaign is trying to message coming out of Michigan, acknowledging pretty much that they are not expecting to win by any means. But they are trying to connect it to exactly what Ed was talking about. She very much sees herself as now the protest candidate to Donald Trump, and saying over and over again, you know, she's gotten about 40% of the vote in some of these states, in South Carolina almost, that represents the party, the percentage of the party that is upset with Donald Trump. Her campaign is saying today, look at the results coming out of Michigan for Biden and that protest vote. We're going to send the same kind of message. The issue, however, is that as she looks forward to Super Tuesday, you know, how far can you go by not winning any states? And especially Michigan will deliver the 5th state loss for her. She's vowing to continue on through Super Tuesday. But again, tonight, although we know that Donald Trump is likely to win, it still gives him kind of the momentum to keep going forward.
And this is a swing state for a reason. Michigan has everything. Farms, factories, big cities, small towns. If you get outside of Dearborn and the immediate suburbs of Detroit, what do you find interesting, or what are you watching for tonight?
I think we have to watch Western Michigan. That's the part of the state where guys like Peter Meyer and Fred Upton, former members of the House Republican caucus, hail from, and that kind of Republican still lives and works and exists and wants to be part of the GOP in this state. Do they out there in that part of the state, or maybe here in Metro Detroit, favor Nikki Haley over Donald Trump? We'll see. And we'll see if at all, if she's able to get even close to the possibility of accruing at least a handful of delegates in a state that's got a messy way of allocating them in the next few days. And it's so emblematic of the troubles that so many of these big battleground states are having at the state Republican level in terms of organizing them and putting people in charge who can raise money, who can put together an organization that turns out voters. There's a real concern that that could be a problem here in Michigan come the fall.
Hey, Caitlin, when you watch Nikki Haley campaign and you hear her messaging, do you see her and hear her making explicit overtures to these Democrats to come over, these blue-leaning independents to come over, or is she more subtle about it?
It's a really good question, because that is, you know, kind of her coalition, really. She's not making overt overtures, but she is in her messaging, which is, if you want to turn the page from both Donald Trump and Joe Biden, come on in. And we've talked to a lot of Democrats on the campaign trail that are going to her events that are looking exactly for that. Now, she has been hit over and over again by the Trump campaign for that kind of appeal, I should say. And they are also saying that, you know, Democrats supporting her is not representative of the Republican primary. But it is explicit in her messaging of, if you are tired of both parties right now, come to my side. The question is, can she win enough to be able to carry that message through? Certainly, she has the fundraising. I mean, she's continuing to raise money. She is well-funded enough through Super Tuesday. But it's interesting to kind of see this acknowledgement that this is a protest candidacy to Donald Trump.
Is there a lot of advertising by her? I mean, anecdotally, you hear she's on the radio, she's on television. You get it on your phones if you live in Michigan. Did you get a sense of that?
Well, Michigan's interesting, too, because there was such a short time frame. She spent a month in South Carolina campaigning because you had a month leading up to that primary. This is such a tight turnaround. Ed might know better than I do, but her campaign is spending furiously on air. They announced a big ad buy last week heading into the Super Tuesday state. She's on a 7-day, 7-state swing, so she's not even in Michigan today. She's already in Colorado and beyond.
Ed, how much are you hearing or seeing of Nikki Haley, even though she's not in the state, while you're in Michigan?
Not as much as you'd think. And I think the next few days going into Super Tuesday, as she stretches herself across these 10 states for campaign rallies and notably for fundraisers, let's see to what extent she's penetrating the local markets with advertising, with earned media, with any sign of a ground game that can help her win somewhere, whether it's in the West where she is today or up to New England where she's headed soon.
Ed O'Keefe, Caitlin Huey-Burns, thank you both. Up next, we bring in our political panel to analyze the hurdles facing both the Trump and Biden campaigns in Michigan and what it could mean for the swing state come November. You're streaming America Decides.
Well, let me start with this.
This really
Have you told the government?
Did any of that make sense?
What's your response?
You want me to just
What's
keep
wrong
going?
with that argument?
What have you learned?
Do you know why?
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 It's time for 60 Minutes, Sunday on CBS.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
Since you started La Soup in 2014, do you have any sense as to how much food you've rescued from the landfill?
We've rescued 4.5 million pounds.
I can't even fathom how much food that is.
And that's one little person in one little city in America. We're going to call this chicken piccata. We did 450 of these meals today.
This is the exact dish that you and I are going to have.
Yep.
Oh my God.
Is it good? Mm-hmm. Having a plan of how to keep people fed should be in every single city.
If we eliminated food waste, could we eliminate
hunger? Yes.
Eating Trash, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
At this moment, terrorists could be plotting another attack.
9/11 triggered a counter-terrorist system that included a secret database.
This person needs a closer look.
A growing list of nearly 2 million people, including some Americans who say they're innocent.
For 1 hour flight, I have to spend 6 hours to go and come back.
CBS Reports explores the system, the people responsible for it, and those pushing for change.
I'm not fighting against them. I'm fighting for them to do the right thing.
The Watch List, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
He was there when the war in Ukraine started.
Extreme history. It's a big moment.
The extraordinary story behind Sean Penn's new Paramount Plus documentary, Superpower, when we go person to person.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
AI is among the most world-changing technologies ever.
Curing diseases, scientific breakthroughs, making lives better.
They can help us with medical discoveries, scientific discoveries, doing better agriculture, having cures for things like Alzheimer's.
It's also going to really transform the way we work.
The uplifting potential of artificial intelligence is limitless.
It gives you a friend, somebody to chat with 24/7 that is non-judgmental. He makes me feel loved and desired.
And so are its downfalls.
The problem with all this AI is that it's unpredictable and uncontrollable.
The choices we make now will have lasting effects for decades, maybe even centuries.
The ChatGPT revolution, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
It's like a screenplay, something straight out of Hollywood.
Human remains found this week.
The mystery would haunt investigators for years.
A gripping true crime original, 48 Hours, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
How can we become our best selves? That may be more about character than talent.
The ultimate mark of your potential is how far you've climbed, not how high you've gone.
Realizing your true potential with Adam Grant as we go person to person.
If a sizable portion of the Democratic electorate here in Michigan votes uncommitted during the primary, that will be a 5-alarm fire for the White House and for the Biden campaign.
Outside Oakland University, near Detroit, that's Dave Dulio, the political analyst for the university. Welcome back to America Decides. The Biden campaign is facing multiple challenges in Michigan, including tonight's uncommitted protest vote. We'll see what that means come November. And for more on that, let's bring in our panel, Braxton Booker and Dante Cini, Braxton's national political reporter at Politico. Dante is founder of the American Communities Project at Michigan State University, also a political reporter for the Wall Street Journal. Sorry to invoke the other university on you there. Braxton, what do we make of this uncommitted vote campaign, and what would make it a success?
Well, look, I think it's more of the same. You're seeing fissures within the Democratic Party, folks who are unenthused about the Biden reelection. You have folks who are saying like, hey, you are standing shoulder to shoulder with Israel. You need to change course. And this is the first step that, Michigan's to show that, hey, we are not standing in lockstep with you because you have not been open to our concerns about how this war in Gaza is taking place. And so you need to actually change direction here. And certainly we're going to see how many people show up. The previous uncommitteds have ranged around the 20,000 vote range. So I think success needs to be in the 30,000 vote range today to really send a message that this effort is far different than any other committed effort that we've seen in previous cycles. But we'll see what happens once the polls close.
Dante, it's a winter day in Michigan. Somebody goes out in the car to go vote uncommitted.
Yeah.
Should I read that as they're persuadable still because they're engaged?
Right.
They're not just staying home on the couch to protest what they see.
Right. Well, they're also not voting. There are a lot of ways you could cast a protest vote where you could vote in the Republican primary. It's no primary in Michigan.
Yep.
So you could do that. Yeah, I think they're engaged. I think they're still gettable. The other way I think to think about it is, look, there's a lot of talk of the Arab American population in Michigan. It's about 220,000 people in a state of 10 million, okay? It's not massive. Now, look, if elections can be very close, we saw that in 2016. So every vote, but if you get to the point where it's like, look, 10,000 votes can cost you the election, if you really get that close, it could be anybody. I mean, it could be any voting bloc. It could be young people didn't turn out. It could be African-American voters didn't turn out. It could be Arab-American voters didn't turn out. But I think that if you're Biden and you're looking at results tonight, you don't want to see that number. I would shy away from a real number. I'd say like 10%. In 2010 or in 2012, Barack Obama ran unopposed in Michigan, Democratic primary. About 10% of the vote, even then, went uncommitted.
Braxton, so much focus, rightfully so, is on what happens in and near Detroit. You talk about Michigan. Primaries or general election. There's massive counties, Wayne County, Oakland County, Macomb County. What do you make of the Biden campaign's effort to do what it needs to do in that area? City of Detroit, Wayne County, where they need not just margins, they need huge margins.
Yeah, you got to run up the score there, right? Mm-hmm. And what you really need to do is make sure you're taking care of the base of your party, right? I think what remains to be seen is whether or not there is this enthusiasm for Biden, whether or not folks on the ground can actually get folks to the polls. And look, it's hard to really put a fine point on this uncommitted vote, because I was talking to a political strategist today, somebody who works at the DNC. She's like, look, this is important, but like no one is tearing their hair out about this, because they know that on the other side is Trump. Right. Trump has first couple of days put in a Muslim ban. So they are not so worried that folks are not going to show up in November. Sure, they'll take what this protest vote actually will be. They'll assess, they'll re-engage with these voters, but they are not overly worried about this being a dramatic fallout from folks who will turn out for Biden in November.
That's a campaign. There's lots of things for everybody to tear their hair out about. There's many reasons to want to pull your hair out. This may be just one of them. Mm-hmm. To that end, one of the things that we'll note when we go to Michigan, major university cities, a little purple hue to them, East Lansing, where Michigan State is, Kalamazoo, Western Michigan. What do you make of what you've seen so far of youth vote, young voters in Michigan? Are they ambivalent or are they disappointed?
So I can answer this question directly. I co-teach a class at Michigan State, so I'm there talking to the students a couple times a month. They are not engaged right now. I mean, look, it's a primary. Look, it's tough. It's tough to get the college students to turn out for a general. To get them to turn out for a primary is very, very, very difficult. They're not super engaged. Also, this is a kind of weird fact, but people should have this in their back pockets for tonight. Michigan and Michigan State, the two largest universities in the state of Michigan, are both on spring break this week. which is just something to keep in mind when we watch the results come in. That's a lot of kids that aren't there. So that's something to...
Let's take a moment and reflect on the fact that Michigan celebrates spring break on February 27th.
Winter break, yeah.
Fair enough. Youth apathy is different than youth disappointment.
Yeah.
And it begs the next question, Dante, what does this look like in Michigan, a Trump-Biden rematch as we move toward November? Does it look different in political complexion than other states?
Than in other states, yeah. Because Michigan and Pennsylvania and Wisconsin, which we always talk about as this blue wall states a lot, they share one very important thing in common. They have this huge block of suburban, white, blue-collar voters that are huge for Donald Trump. He needs that. He needs that vote. Just like the Democrat, Biden, in this case, in 2024, needs the big urban vote out of Detroit, Milwaukee, Philadelphia. So that's something to keep in mind. Those things really make Michigan and those other states stand out. What does it look like? We were talking about this in the weigh-in, like to try to get a read right now on what things are going to look like in 24 and say, maybe it'll look like 2020, maybe it'll look like 2016. It just feels like everything is unsettled right now. And maybe some of it is the war in the Middle East and dealing with inflation and just things, and maybe even the general feelings that the voters have about Trump and Biden. But it feels very unsettled right now. But it's the most, normally at this point in an election season, I mean, I don't ever make predictions because I don't like doing that. But in my head, I'm like, I think I know how this is going to go. I'm less sure this year than I normally would be.
Well, you make the point about being unsettled, but it's also, the ideas about these two presidential nominees are very hardened, right?
Yeah.
These are not unknowns. These are not folks who are new onto the scene. So the idea that Biden or Trump are going to sway new voters to come out or change minds.
Yeah, changing minds.
It's really hard to even imagine how that's going to look. I think folks are, look, the primary is over. The primary has been over, really. And folks are just ready to get to November. Now, what November looks like, whether or not it's apathy, whether or not these two candidates are going to be competing with the couch, right? Like that is what remains to be seen for both of these campaigns. But I don't think Biden or Trump or the Republicans or Democrats are really going to change anybody's mind between now and November. But I do think, international forces, international things are going to really drive what people do.
There's a lot of talk in every election about persuadables. Don't do that in 2024. Okay, there just aren't a lot of persuadables out there. It's a sliver of the electorate. It's really talking about whether or not you get your voters out. It's the voters versus the couch. Yeah.
Dante, Braxton, good information. Thank you both. President Biden said today he thinks a deal can be made to avoid a government shutdown. Congressional leaders indicated that's possible too. Where the negotiations stand, coming up next. You're streaming America Decides.
Hey there, welcome to The Uplift.
I thought she was a groom, and I stepped back and I went, oh, you're the queen. She's going to be with me every instant that I'm alive.
I just wanted to see if you'd go to Disneyland with me today.
I look over at him and he's smiling.
I'm going to remember that the rest of my life.
They told us when he was going to be born, he was only going to live for 30 minutes. It's really a miracle that he's with us today.
The Uplift. Stream now on the free CBS News app.
There is no more room in our city.
New York City is receiving record numbers of migrants.
Today, we're going to have more than 500 adults and children come through that door.
Tensions rise as shelters reach max capacity.
We don't have to take care of them.
CBS Reports goes inside a crisis cities and families are facing as they fight to survive.
The United States still has that glimmer of hope for people to come here.
Fighting for a future. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
She's a country music legend, philanthropist, fashion icon, and now rock star.
I think there's a lot to be said about being comfortable with who you are.
Find out what's next for Dolly Parton when we go person to person.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
That desired farm, it's a wonderful place to raise children, and it still is.
Promises broken.
Black Americans have been the target of racism and discrimination pretty much from the time they acquired ownership in the land.
Costing black farmers hundreds of billions in generational wealth.
They did everything to make sure we were run off that land.
But communities are uniting to continue the fight.
Collective ownership is powerful.
To keep their land and their dreams alive.
To watch my children play on land that we own means everything.
So land is power.
Most definitely.
40 Acres and a Mule, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
She is a beloved American icon and head of a media empire. But is Oprah Winfrey happy? How do you define happiness?
Yeah, I call it happiness.
Find out when we go person to person.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
It was genocide, a deliberate effort by the United States government to eliminate the food source that was relied upon by Native American tribes.
American bison were slaughtered and Native Americans displaced.
And that's how tribes were subjugated to reservations and our lands were taken.
But now, through conservation efforts at Yellowstone,
Buffalo provided everything that we needed. Now they need help.
a herd grows.
We need to step up and help them.
And a culture is reborn.
When the buffalo return and come back, that's when our tribe will begin to heal.
Yellowstone Bison Revival, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Welcome back to America Decides. President Biden and congressional leaders met today to work on a solution towards averting a government shutdown. Meanwhile, some Americans, including military families, are bracing for what happens if Washington can't get a deal done in time.
Families are living paycheck to paycheck. They're not planning months and years into the future. So families are making decisions right now about, do we buy groceries this week? Do we wait for what's going to happen next week?
The wife of a U.S. Marine Corps veteran channeling lots of people's concerns, Nicole Killian, CBS News congressional correspondent. Feels like they have to get something done soon, like very soon, before Friday.
Yeah, but you can't tell that that's happening because we still haven't seen a bill, right? Which if they need to get it done by Friday, we would need to see a bill today, and we don't have one. Leader Jeffries, who was also part of this meeting with congressional leaders and the president, did just put out a Dear Colleague letter saying, that they are committed to working around the clock to try to avoid a shutdown. Everybody's saying the right things, whether that's Speaker Johnson, Leader Schumer, Leader McConnell, that they want to avoid it. But again, unclear how you do that if we haven't seen any text.
Everybody said they want a deal. A deal must get done. Do you have a sense, I'm struggling to find it, what the issues are that they're still negotiating or what the issues are that may still be in dispute?
Well, a lot of this stems from the issue at hand, which is the whole point of this exercise and these continued extensions in terms of the funding is that ideally, if Congress is working as it should, they should be passing 12 appropriations bills on an annual basis. That has not happened for some time. And so there was a process put in place in part from that debt limit deal that we saw last spring to try to force that process to move forward. But at each and every turn, when it's time to have these bills in hand, they're not ready. And so that's what brings us to this March 1st and March 8th deadline, respectively, because technically we should have appropriations bills for some of these government agencies. Now, today, both Leader Schumer and Leader McConnell seem to suggest that some progress is being made kind of on those first four, which would affect, for instance, the Department of Agriculture, Housing, Veterans Affairs, and other agencies. But again, even if they come up with a deal sometime this week, they still may need some kind of temporary bridge or continuing resolution to get to the appropriations bills at hand. So that's where it's a little murky and unclear kind of what that next path or step could be.
The meeting also involved Ukraine aid. What did you make when Speaker Johnson walked out to speak to reporters without Mitch McConnell as his side, as is customary, where the party leadership would be in unison together?
Well, we do know that Speaker Johnson had a one-on-one meeting with President Biden at the White House following that meeting with congressional leaders. But Leader Schumer made clear that there was some tension around this issue of Ukraine during the meeting with the president. And the president himself said as much that, congressional inaction would make the situation in Ukraine dire. Their military equipment is being depleted. Obviously, they have been asking for aid for months. That is something that the White House has been pushing for months as well. We just, marked the 2-year anniversary of the war between Russia and Ukraine. So it is vital in the view of the White House and congressional Democrats and Republicans. But as you know, Scott, Speaker Johnson continues to be non-committal around this issue, particularly because he still believes that the border should be handled first, which we know was part of the supplemental package before it was taken out. So again, some real decisions have to be made on his part, more specifically about whether he'll at least give this an up or down vote.
All the while, they're juggling the potential impeachment trial of Alejandro Mayorkas and Hunter Biden all day tomorrow before the House Oversight and Judiciary Committees. Nicole Killian, we'll see you there.
All right. You as well.
Thank you very much.
It's a date.
That does it for today. We're back with another edition of America Decides tomorrow at 5 p.m. Eastern. You're streaming CBS News.
Original documentary from CBS reports tensions rising between a powerful country and a vital island.
The supply of this technology came grinding to a halt. The world would grind to a halt.
Absolutely.